Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Creative Confidence Podcast. I'm Suzanne Gibbs Howard, founder of IDEO, and I always have conversations with special guests about creativity, leadership, innovation, and growth. And today is no different. I'll be talking with Brandon Viney. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you for having me, Suze.
I'm so glad you're here. He is a group creative director at Google, and we'll share more about what that is and his fascinating career path in just a moment. But before we do, I have a few things that I'd love to get going in our community. I'd love for each of you, if you are willing, to introduce yourselves. You can go ahead and change your chat settings to all panelists and attendees. I'd love it if you tell us who you are, where you are today, and maybe, if you're willing, something that you're interested in learning more about in our hopefully bright and shiny new 2022. And I already see people in from Brazil, and we'll see more people in just a moment. Some good South America representation, Dubai, the Netherlands, London, India.
Richmond, Virginia.
All right. We've got some Virginia representation. Wow. Wow. Awesome. Great. And global crew. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And I have one more thing that I'd love to share with you this morning is knowing that we are starting a new year. It is a time where people are thinking a lot about what's new for them and what they want to grow toward in the new year. We wanted to give you a little gift to help you get set down the right path. We are offering a little gift certificate for IDEO courses. You can just put in Creative 15 if you get anything during the month of January. So we have 8 courses starting this month. There is an incredible variety there for you, and we hope you'll join us. We hope that gives you an extra boost. Everybody needs an extra hand these days. And so we hope that that is something that is helpful to you. Yeah, as I see Victoria saying, keep the mojo going during these difficult times. So let me tell you a little bit more about Brandon, and then we'll dive into the conversation with him. But I was very excited to have Brandon on for a couple of reasons. Number one, we wanted to do something not only about inspiration, but about mentorship. And Brandon came to our attention as somebody who is an incredibly powerful mentor. He mentors somebody in our extended IDEO family. And so we were excited to hear more from him. At the same time, when I started to learn about Brandon, I went to his own portfolio online. I invite you to check it out at brandonviney.com. And I literally lost like a day of my life because I just couldn't stop viewing his work. It was so powerful. It had this unique voice in it, an incredible combination of local and global all at the same time, a mood and a vibe that was very much exquisite, beautiful, a tinge of sadness, and a strong dose of hope. And so I wanted to learn more about this person who had created these things. You've probably seen some of his work yourself. He's created the Year in Search videos for Google. One that's quite powerful is the Don't Do It campaign for Nike. Oh, yeah. And so I think you probably know his work already. And so here's a chance to learn more about this person. Today, we'll talk with Brandon about his own career path, how he sparked and found inspiration to keep him going on his own journey. We'll talk with him about his favorite pieces of creative work and what inspired them. We'll go deep on mentorship and talk about why it's important and how organizations can hopefully create systems for mentorship. And then talk a little bit more with Brandon about his tips for helping all of us find daily inspiration. So just that. Welcome.
Thank you.
Brandon, I would love to have you get us started by sharing a bit about your own personal path. We got excited about Virginia. That's where you're from. Yeah. You didn't start off thinking, oh my God, all my life, I want to be a creative director. You had a very different journey. And so if you could tell us a little bit about how you got going in your career.
I had no idea that this was even a career. I didn't even understand it. Creative was a thing you could do, for a living. It was never something I had seen. Being from where I'm from, a small town in the mountains of Virginia, we're very blue collar upbringing, and you've never really seen that type of outlet for a career. I thought that I wanted to be a football player for the rest of my life, because we're in football country. If you know anybody from Virginia understands that Appalachian little belt, that is football country to the fullest, near Virginia Tech. And we were just growing up as a kid. I thought that was the thing, and I will have success as long as my legs will take me there. And and people where I'm from would always say you have to have a backup plan. And the only other thing I always felt like I was really great at was art. And I was the kid that got in trouble every day for drawing, and the kid that got in trouble every day for talking. And when someone read a story, I would have a different version of the story, And so that was kind of a nuisance probably for a lot of people, as my mother would say. But that ended up being kind of the path I was left with after I had a little injury in high school, and it was time to move on from aspirations of playing sports to doing something, more longevity and a little more insurance behind it, right?
Yeah. What were some of the things? So that's a bold shift in a journey. What were some of the things that helped you down your path, or some of the lessons that you learned as you were moving from football to something more creative?
Yeah, I just had no idea what I was doing, right? And so it wasn't like I pivoted and just went straight to creative. I just had to figure out, like, what could I do? I knew I was, I'm getting older, and I need to get a job, and and that was kind of motivation. So I went to college, and I'd never really seen anyone go to college. My twin sister had persuaded me to go to community college. She was like, "You're going to get your grades up," and I was like, "Okay, I'm going to go get my grades up." And at that community college, I found an art professor who was just phenomenal, and she had persuaded me to go to Virginia Commonwealth University to study art, because she was just like, "You're a big fish, and you need to be in a big pond." And that was like the first time I'd ever heard anybody say anything like that, and have faith in me. So literally, with the help of a lot of the people at that school, they like helped me apply. Literally, I had no idea what I was doing, Susan. I'm telling you, like, when I say no idea, I mean like no clue what I was doing.
It is like a mystical path of figuring out how to do college applications. Everybody needs help. Yeah.
I hadn't seen anyone do it. So it was just this opportunity of like, someone just helped me. It was literally like, anyone who could help me, I'll take it. And I ended up moving up to Richmond, Virginia, which from where I'm from is like moving to New York City. It was like there was more people on my block than there was in my entire town, growing up. So it was culture shock. And I ended up having to drop out of school because I just didn't understand it. And I didn't understand how to navigate it. I didn't understand the finances. I didn't understand the curriculum. I just didn't understand it. And I decided I was going to go back to school a year later, and I went and saw a career counselor. And the career counselor said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I think I want to be a director." And well, you clearly can't do that because you have never directed. I think things have changed a lot for those type of career paths now since then. But I said, "I have these Nike commercials that I want to make." And she said, "Really? Do you draw?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "You're an art director. We have a great program here." And I said, "Sign me up." And for the first time in my academic life, I found something that I did well naturally.
Wow.
And it opened up pathways in my mind. Finally, there's a thing that I do that feels good to do, that I think I could do for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's so interesting that you already, you knew you wanted to make Nike commercials. Like, you had these visions. And so one of the things we like to do is give our community activities to try themselves. And I know you have an activity that you do often with people that you mentor. Mm-hmm. For the purposes of today, we're going to call it, what's your creative identity? And I'd love for you to share what that is, and we'll inspire some of our people here to try that themselves.
Yeah. So I have to start by saying that, like, a creative identity should and will constantly be evolving for the rest of your career and the rest of your life. But it really boils down to starting on focusing on why, right? So when young creatives will come to me, aspiring creatives will come to me and ask questions, one of the first things we try to do is focus on why, right? Chances are you already like things. You just don't know why you like them. So I give this creative assignment with sole purpose of understanding that why. And you see, a lot of times, like, people can really tell you what they love. They just really can't hone in on why they love it. And in that discovery is where you really start to hone in on the beginnings of your creative identity. So the first thing I do is start with a couple of creative muses. Let's say you're a filmmaker or a designer. Who are 5 filmmakers, or who are 5 designers, or who are 5 artists that you seem to just naturally gravitate to their work? And then you want to put those people down on paper. You literally want to write those names down and understand these are your peers, these are your muses, and these are the people you're really going to be consulting when you think about creative work, right? And then you're going to take 5 pieces of that work from each one of those people that you gravitated to. And you're going to start to understand and see the trends and the connections between those work, why you like this particular artist's piece of work. And in that, you're going to see these connections, and you're going to see these patterns that are going to start to reveal themselves. And then the most important part comes after that. And that's when we start to define what it is in these things that we like, the why, right? And we get at that. And then we need to start defining that, literally writing down why I like this. And what this does, it allows you to get to understand what you actually like, and it starts to put words to why you actually like it and connect with it. And this leads you to developing a way to talk about your own work, right? And so you start to better understand why you like things. So you start to actually be able to articulate why you want to do things that you do. And this is the basis. This is to me, the building blocks of understanding how to have a creative career.
That's so cool. I love, there's so many aspects in that. Like, number one, it's visual. So you're creating a portfolio of other people's work to keep yourself inspired. But I think the why question is absolutely quintessential, right? And we forget that so often. I think that is the most common question that I'm asking people all the time. That's great. You want to do it, but why? Why? What is behind that? And then you're translating those visual or tangible representations into language so that you can talk about it and push things forward.
Well, and now you now have the language to articulate your own ideas based on the things that you've been inspired by, because you've defined the actual why, the fundamental why of what it is that you like.
When you're working with somebody who maybe they don't even know yet that they want to be a filmmaker or a website developer, or, how do you have other activities that you invite people into in that case?
Lots of them. When I was coming up, we didn't have social media the way we do today, right? And I have really fallen in love with the positive side of social media. I think one of the things that I'll tell people, if you have an inclination or you don't even have a starting spot, go into social media and find things that you like. And the moment you find something that you like, go look at YouTube, go look at Twitter, go look at TikTok, go look at Instagram. These are such amazing resources to find inspiration if you kind of tailor it to do such, right? Like, you can't just free flow and just scroll. You need to really hone in on it. So one of the things I'll do is say, you need to inundate yourself with a particular subject matter. And so find a hashtag, find a subject, pottery, and go in and search to the depths of the bottom of these things, right? Go to Instagram and find everything pottery you can find. And what this in return does is it becomes the formulation of questions that you didn't have. You hear terminology, you see processes that you never even knew existed. And now you have the starting point to actually understand what it is that you want to do, right? And you have confidence. You also build confidence because you've seen it. You've seen beginning to end. You've heard things about it. It's a little bit like taking class, right?
Yeah.
But you get to do it at your own pace and learn at your own pace. And I found by giving that simple assignment to people, 4 months later, 5 months later, someone comes back and they're definitively focused on a particular thing now. They're like, hey, I literally know everything about it and I've never done it and I'm ready to do it. I have the confidence to go do the thing that I would like to do creatively.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you're talking about, like, kind of not just letting the rabbit holes on the internet suck you into them aimlessly, but directing your path.
Yeah. That's the secret. You can't fall into it. You have to use the internet and all the power of the internet and tailor it to the things that you want to see. We talk about the algorithms, and I work at Google. Hey, so I'm very familiar with the conversations around it. But I actually think that hacking the algorithm to see the things you want to see and reinforcing the creativity that you need is such a strong way to really become confident in doing creative work.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when you do this for yourself, either early in your career or even more currently, what are some of the things that you're looking at, and what are some of the words that you use to define your voice?
Still defining it, but I would say my voice is honest and cultural. And it's what I've always set out to do is represent myself, people like myself, people from places where like I'm from. And I love being able to be very authentic and honest. And that's what I've always set out to do. And I always gravitated to work in the world that had an honest tone, that had a real point of view, that felt like it represented people accurately, and not as hyperbolic as some of the things that we see in the world are. And so I've been able to create work that always has that same tone today. So I've honed in on it, and I'm always still refining and always still developing that. But to answer your early question, early on, I did the same thing. I would just obsess over one thing, one artist, and try to figure out what it is about this artist that I love. I was a huge Chuck Close fan the first time I ever saw a Chuck Close painting. I couldn't stop staring at it, right? And just to understand, I went down a hole of just finding all of his work from the very beginning to the very end of his career. And it taught me so much about seeing things differently, how his work evolved over all these different times, right? And how human his work was. In fact, it was so human, they were literally portraits, you know. And I always thought about Chuck when I made work, like how to make work feel alive, how to make a still image feel alive, how to make a moving image feel alive. And so things like that, I'm just hyper focused into one area and really understand why I like what I like.
Yeah. I always call that process like peeling the onion. You've got like this onion and you're just like peeling back the layers on it, looking at more, reading articles, digging into different aspects. So cool.
Yeah.
Now it's so interesting. You bring up honesty and truth and all of these things. And yet the work that you do is very much about brand and advertising. And so I wonder if you could tell us more explicitly, in your role as a group creative director at Google, what exactly do you do?
Well, we tell stories. It's wonderful being able to work at a company like Google and be a storyteller. You know, we've been referred to sometimes as like the chief storytellers of the company. And that's such an awesome way to look at what we do. And basically my entire career has just been about telling stories and trying to tell honest ones. And we represent brands. You know, as a creative, you're a hired gun. You do what, you know, your job is to obviously shine the greatest light on the client you're working for, the product you're working for, and these things, but you want to do so with some dignity and some respect and some honesty and some truth, you know. And it's what I've always hung my hat on doing. It's like, I love what I do. It's a fun job. You get to wear what you want to every day. you don't have to wear a suit to work. And I can tell really interesting stories and try to find the human truth in those stories. And it's a rewarding way to look at work.
Yeah. So I know we talked about, would we show your work during this? We think it's really hard to show work on a podcast. So we're going to talk about a couple of your favorite pieces, and we'll provide links to them so that people can check it out on your portfolio. But I would love to talk with you about the Black History Month piece that you created for Google. Could you tell us a little bit about how that came about, what you created, what inspired you?
Oh, it was such an amazing team of people that worked on that. That work will always stand out to me as very important and very special. It was, you know, to take Black History Month, obviously, as a Black creative, to be able to work on a piece with the scale of Google that represents Black culture and Black history at the scale of Google. You know, it's rare in your career to get a brand that has that type of scale. But what was so interesting about that work is we were able to tell a data story that is a real human reflection of, much like anthropology, right? We took data and we were able to say, this is you. This isn't us editorializing what the people have said in the world. Everything that we showed is actually true, and we have the data to prove it. And when you peel that onion back and you get to see like the way, you know, Black history has been represented through search data, it was such an amazing, powerful thing to, you know, we always have speculation, we always do strategy, and we always think about these things, but to actually have the proof sitting right in front of you, like everything we're saying here, you said it as the people, everyone who ever clicked the search engine said this and casted your vote in a way, right? And to be able to prop up, you know, the Black community and during Black History Month at the scale of Google was special.
That's so interesting. So you're really like pulling the data from people's searches in order to get the assets to create this vision.
Yeah, you kind of get the aggregate of it, right? Like we get to see spikes in our data and understand, you know, where peaks and valleys were. And when you kind of look at that stuff over the aggregate of history, you can really start to pull out these tidbits and go, wow, that person is the most searched at that subject matter of all time in the history of search. And then you start thinking, well, who else? And a wonderful writer on our team, Aaron Hoffman, was the person that kind of started that aha moment. And we were talking about Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech is the most searched speech in the history of search. And she said, what else is the most searched? And everyone just went, and it was like,
what were some of the things? Yeah. What did you find that was like a surprise to you?
Oh man, there's so many I can't tell, but we really got into things like there were some disappointments. There were things that you thought would be the most searched that actually weren't. And like when you think about like Michael Jordan, you're like, oh, he would be the most searched at this thing, but it'd be like, no, actually, he's not the most searched at. Someone else is the most searched at, and he's the most searched at this. And so you really start to tell this story of our history of when these peaks and valleys have happened and why they happened, and being able to see that and tell a real, honest story. As a creative, we get to create what we think is the story we should tell. But in this case, we're actually using technology and using actual information to tell just the truest, authentic representation of story. And that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And another one that I think really represents your honest perspective, and you're finding the way to take a brand to a place where it's attached and expressing its larger purpose, is the campaign, Just a Kid From, that you did with Powerade. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit. I mean, there's so many layers to that campaign of what you did to pull that off. Yeah. So yeah,
that campaign was just so fun because it was, a lot of times when you work on brands, we work on what's called a challenger brand. And in other words, it's an underdog brand. It doesn't have a lot of market share, a lot of recognition, and isn't necessarily inspiring, right? And we look at some of these brands and we say like, well, this is a Coca-Cola brand, and it's a sports drink. But how can we tell a story about a sports drink that's inspiring to a community, or tell a story around that's an inspiring story? And the sports drink gets to be a character in that. And that work was crafted so well. And one of the biggest compliments I've ever gotten about that work over the years is that entire campaign spawned so many other campaigns in our industries. I've had friends that work in film call me and say, hey, we use that as a reference. I've had friends that work at other companies say, hey, we use that as a reference. And it's just kind of has been a thing that's kept giving as far as inspiration. So many young creatives have said, I got into this industry because I saw that work.
Wow.
Yeah. It's such a compliment, right? Such a compliment to know that like something you did made someone feel seen enough to say, I can do that too. I know who must be behind that work, and I could do that too.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about, tell us the story of this campaign. What's it about? And maybe even just talking about the rose and a little bit about making that film.
Well, we went through some issues with wanting to make some wonderful work that told a story about a community, and we'd hit some hiccups in the road and didn't think we were going to be able to do it. And we had Derrick Rose, who at the time was a very young up-and-coming superstar athlete out of Chicago. And he had an amazing story about being from Chicago and still playing in Chicago, right? And Derrick suffered a really terrible injury. And it was a perfect time for us to tell a story about overcoming adversity. And so we just got together and formulated this plan, and we said, man, it's missing something. And we really need to figure out, how to make this hit home harder. And we started thinking about people with voices and who speak to communities and talk about adversity. And we thought about Tupac. and as creatives, you always throw out pie in the sky ideas. But in this case, we were like, there's no way on earth we'll ever get the rights to use Tupac, actually. And we shot for it, and his family heard it, called us up. We got on the phone with them, and they said, this is so inspiring. And it is the only time we've ever given the rights for his usage. Wow. And we think this is really important and a very impactful and powerful story. And so as a kid who's a music obsessed kid with Tupac when I was a kid, to be able to be tethered to that for the rest of my life is amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah. So powerful. And so that's another one I invite you guys. Yeah.
That's actually Tupac's voice. So that's a real special moment for us.
That just shows how honest and real your work is.
Yeah.
I want to move us to a conversation about mentoring, because I know that's something that both you and I find so incredibly important. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how and why you started mentoring younger professionals?
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of mentors, Susan, and part of it's from where I came from. There just wasn't a lot of people that were doing the things that I was setting out to do and kind of charting that path. And I always had a passion for teaching as well as a passion for learning. And selfishly, I always felt like I learned more when I was teaching the things I just learned, it reinforced that learning. And so I selfishly always wanted to teach so I could reinforce my own education and my own knowledge on things. But, I took it personally that it was hard for me to find mentors and answers to questions. So anytime someone would reach out for advice, I just took that very seriously. Yeah. And it just kind of became a rolling thing. Like anyone who, an underclassman in college, someone on the street, like anyone who reached out and had any type of, if I had any type of knowledge, I just really took it seriously. So I felt like I wasted a lot of time trying to figure out how to align my talents with a career, productive career. And I wanted to save other people that time.
Yeah.
And I still do to this day. I spend a lot of time replying to messages and giving some of those exercises like we spoke about earlier, just to start, reducing the distance between where a person thinks they are and where they want to be,
Yeah. You had a line that you said to me. I don't know if you remember this when we first met about the stairs.
I always tell a lot of my students and stuff that my goal is to give you the escalator, because I took the stairs, and all I ask is that you give someone the elevator. And I think that kind of visually is, to me, something that's has always rang true. I just want to increase your, make your path a little easier so you can make someone else's path a little easier.
Yeah.
So we can all get to where we want to go.
Yeah. Nice. We're going to move to questions. I see people have some burning questions.
Yeah.
I invite them to share them here in the chat so that we can all benefit from hearing your answers. But I have one more thing that I want to talk to you about or hear from you. I know that so many companies now are copping on to the idea of mentorship and how important that is to bring more equity in our workforce, to provide a more level playing field for people who don't just look like the most senior leaders in the firm, but have a greater range and variety of perspectives and backgrounds and lived experiences. And so you've been a part at Google of setting up a creative fellowship program. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about RARE and what's some of the things that are going well in institutionalizing a mentorship program. It's probably the most meaningful thing I've been a part of it at Google. It really allowed me to do what I did in my spare time, what my passion was outside of work, and scale that with the power of a company the size of Google. But to answer your question, one of the things is empathy. Like one of the things you have to have in order, as these like organizations try to have programs, you got to have empathy and understand, especially now more than ever, but to understand that people aren't coming from the same starting point, and that everyone has a different story and a different journey. I personally try to be as helpful as much outside of work as I do inside of work, because the thing that I found, Suze, is that if a person's life has mentorship, it's much easier to get your career growth and development and confidence up, right? If the aspects of your life are being assured up, then you have one less thing to worry about outside of getting that career. And so one of the things that I always try to tell people who ask me about mentorship on a professional level is make sure that you ask people how they're doing and understand who they actually are and where they're actually coming from. And don't try to create a catch-all that assumes that everyone is on the same level, starting from the same place with the same information, And aside from that, having patience, you have to be very patient with these programs. You're not going to build an entire roster of talent overnight. So you have to be patient and develop people correctly. Yeah. Are there things that Google has done to support the program to make it easier?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was phenomenal to start it as a question. It literally, at the previous employer I was at, Wyden Kinley, they have a wonderful program there called WK12, and they are 12 now, and they were going to, I was going to take over that program and work with them on that. And when I took the job at Google, I said, that's the one thing I regret not sticking around for. And Google said, well, why don't you just do it here? And all of my superiors were like, whatever you need, like, do it. And with the help of some much smarter people than me, we were able to just get it going in 4 months, I think, of me being at Google. We had already started a program and have retained pretty much around 50% of the people that come through that program. Everyone who's left has went off to amazing jobs as well. And so it's been in its short infancy, really productive. Had COVID not hit, we probably would have even better numbers on it. But when COVID came, we had to kind of recalibrate how we were doing things. And we shifted a little bit backwards to be able to accommodate that, but it's still going and still going very strong.
Yeah, it's all about playing the long game. Definitely.
It is.
Definitely. I want to go to some of the questions that we have here, and I have one from you sang. And it isn't the journey part of the learning? And so if everyone takes the elevator, wouldn't the person miss out on some of the learning experience?
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
how you think about that.
I think that is so true. But I also think that like there's a lot of little mistakes you don't have to learn on your own. You can learn from someone else. And it's a reason, like there's a reason we go to YouTube and look up something, right? Like because we're trying to bypass the headache, and we're trying to bypass some of the simple errors that we may miss. And I think mentorship is a lot of that. A lot of times all I'm doing is as a mentor is providing you with perspectives. You still have to choose the perspective, and you still have to choose to get on the escalator, but all I can do is point you in the direction of that. And a lot of times that confidence of just understanding there is options, and I have heard this before, seen this before, it just creates a more confident, it's a more confident path for you to walk down, whichever path you choose.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I have to pipe in here because I think it is part of that leveling the playing field. A lot of people start off with more funds, more of a safety net, people in their life who know things about things that they're into. And a lot of people don't. And so I think mentorship is a way to shore up those gaps for some of the people and equalize the network for people who didn't grow up with natural mentors all around them. Yeah. So really important. We have some questions also about how you stay creative and keep inspiration. Do you have tools or places or tips for how you stay fueled up and inspired?
Music is one of my big inspirations, and it always has been. And as like a hobbyist, as a music hobbyist, I was a DJ for many years, and for probably 20 plus years, I was a DJ, and that's kind of how I supported my way through college when I had nothing else. But music was always a way to bail myself out of a creative slump, and I always call it consulting the muses. We talked about this earlier. When you write down those 5 people or more, one of the things that you have to do is envision asking those people what they would do in a situation. And thinking about like how it would be approached from other creative point of views, right? Music does that for me. I used to have in advertising, have a way of cracking a brief. I would say, what is the song that answers the creative brief? Who is the director that directs the music video? And who are the actors that would play the characters in it, and nice. By then I would have an entire new way of looking at this thing, sometimes backwards, which allowed me to go forwards, and so I could do that every day. And it made it fun.
Yeah. Nice. But was throwing in here, last night a DJ saved my life, and we all know that feeling. Well, a lot of us do. I'm curious, like what are Renee's asking, like, how has music affected your creative visions? And I know before you talked about the notion of sampling with me.
Yeah. Well, as creatives, we sample everything, right? And like every creative is sampling something, and music in particular, hip hop and house music, like its roots are in sampling. For people who kind of don't understand that, like you're just taking elements and combining them to make something new and interesting. Well, that's the same thing we do. When you look at your favorite designers, they've all pulled inspiration from other people, right? And so you're trying to create your sample database of the things you sample. And that goes back to, again, the thing that we're talking about in the beginning. Once you define who you like and what you like and why you like it, you can start to pull those samples and create an amalgamation of your own style and understand why you do the things you do. And those samples that you're pulling from are never going to be the same for 2 people. No one's going to have the same 5 people. And if they do, they're never going to have the same 5 things that they like, and they never have the same 5 explanations. So, I look at sampling and music and sampling as a creative is kind of 2 in the same.
Yeah. Well, and Emery has a question that's a great build on top of that. This person's asking, it seems like a lot of creative work can blend together and feel derivative, instead of pushing things. How do we take inspiration without getting caught, and use this process of sampling and not get caught in being the same as everyone else? How do you get that bold leap?
That's a great question, because I do think that people get trapped in doing what they think is the right thing to do because they've seen it and they've seen it have success. But you have to, like, that's where being a creative, a confident creative comes into play. And once you develop that confidence, you're able to say, hey, I'm kind of tracking a very familiar line here. And how do we mess this thing up? Or how do we create something that does something a little different than we've seen it before and flip it on its head? And so I think it's totally fine to kind of like emulate and imitate things that work. We see it in almost every aspect of creativity. But at a certain point, you have to develop confidence to say, now, what is my version of it? How am I going to be one of those muses for someone else and do something completely different that someone else says that's something I haven't seen, and that's going to be part of my 5.
Yeah, nice. So how do you become the candle?
And it takes time to work at it, right? It takes time to work at it, but if you create a confidence and start understanding and create a language around the things you do, you will.
Yeah. I'm curious. So there are a couple questions then from people about moving from that inspiration into action. So Veronica's asking, how do you materialize your vision so others can understand it and see the bigger picture that you're crafting in your head? Is there like a stepping stone from your space where you're fueled up, but you've got to get a team together with you?
Well, Veronica, part of that is the same thing we talked about earlier on, is developing a language around what you want. And when you can point to an example of something and articulate what it is that you want, you're able to sample. Again, you're able to kind of sample and put these things together for people to understand it. You're able to articulate it. And that's one of the hardest things as a creative working in a leadership position, is articulating your ideas in a way that everyone can understand it and understand your vision, right? And so you have to develop a language of repetition and keep honing in on a language and keep honing in on a language and keep honing in on examples. And then sometimes it just gets down to basic fidelity, being able to literally draw something out, take a photo of something, write on it. A lot of the work we do would look really rudimentary if you saw it in its developmental stage. Some of it's just doodles with lines pointing to do this. It should look like this. Here's a photo reference of that thing and why we want to do this. And you find that kind of rudimentary way of doing it, very art school style, is a really great way to simply articulate your ideas and get them going. And you'd be surprised at how fast that kick starts the going process.
That's amazing. I think that's great. So it connects back to that creative identity and developing the language and the library of examples to illustrate different things. So
I save on my desktop, and I advise every creative to do this. On my desktop, I save folders on top of folders on top of folders on top of folders of pieces of work, 5 usually from every artist that inspires me, with a little example, with a little detailed write-up of why. And I'm able to pull from that very, very quickly to articulate an idea that I might not have had the language to. I go back and see what I wrote about it. That's what I'm trying to say and why I'm trying to say it.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more. So there are a bunch of questions about mentorship programs. And so Victoria is saying, I'm also starting a mentorship program at my company. What are some of the key success factors or killers that got in the way?
Well, the company has to decide what success looks like for them. For us, it's not a certain set of numbers, or are we actually helping people? Are we doing this authentically for the right reasons? A lot of people are looking for different types of talent, diverse talent, female talent, younger talent, and they'll put these numbers, these metrics on mentorship, right? The program has to do this in order to be successful. Well, if the program elevated one person, that's success to that one person. And isn't that the reason we're doing it in the first place, is to create success for people who might not have that in reach. And so I would say, Victoria, don't put expectations on it in the first few years. Just do what's right, figure it out. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. You can't teach if you haven't learned how to do it, and so you have to go through it and be patient. And also the other thing I'll say is, successful program, it doesn't end when the program ends. You create a network for people, and people should always be able to dip back into that network and tap back into people.
Yeah. I think there's so much, what you're saying resonates with me, because I feel like in the design of really transformational learning experiences, we're seeing more and more about the social side of things, the mentorship side of things. And there's so much still to figure out about what works and what doesn't to help mentorship have big impact. So in the beginning, it's not about big numbers, but then once you figure out those systems and how to scale things over time, it can grow. Yeah. Claire is asking, do you think in-house mentorship is more valuable than external mentorship or vice versa?
That's a great question. I think both are equally important, but I find that in-house mentorship is more directed towards a career in the house, right? It's more directed towards what we're doing internally. External mentorship is a little looser, and sometimes it's a little more about the person itself, a little more life mentorship. And so I think they both are really important. So I have a lot of mentees that aren't in my career path. They're not trying to be art directors or creatives. We're just talking about life, and that's it. And I have a lot who are trying to be creatives, trying to be writers, trying to be designers, trying to be filmmakers, and we focus on that. They might already have some of the life things put together and they're ready to go. So we just try to put as much energy towards where the energy is needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And another great one from Des here is, how do you go about mentoring someone whose ambitions are not matched by their actions?
Oh man, that's a good one. A person has to want it. They have to want to, like, you have to get to the bottom of what it is. Why is the action not there? And a lot of times what you'll find is it's fear. It's fundamentally fear, right? And you have to get to the root of that fear and conquer that fear. Sometimes people are afraid to step because they've never seen anyone step. I'm guilty. There was a point in my life where I was afraid to make moves because I was so afraid, because I'd already stepped out further than people I'd ever been around. And so I was a little bit out there by myself. And so you just have to reinforce it. It's going to be okay. Paint a picture of what the future looks like and say, I'm here to hold your hand. When you're ready to leap, I'll be here to leap with you.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Oh my God. The questions are really flowing now. I'm going to cram in one more. People are asking you about burnout. What happens? Have you ever had burnout? Haven't we all? And do you have any tips for getting out of burnout?
You have to take care of yourself. The last 2 years have been so difficult on us mentally and emotionally. And I imagine that a lot of people are experiencing burnout right now. And I would be telling a bold-faced lie if I said I haven't had bouts with it in very recent times, But one of the things that I always do is remind myself that without my mental health, my job means nothing. It's like riding a bike without a helmet. Like you have to protect the thing that has actually gotten you to the place where you're at. And so you have to take time off, and you have to, cleanse yourself of the things that are distractions. Like get off the internet if you need to. Take a few days. And what I do now, and I advise everyone to try this, I take a walk every single day. Every single day I take a walk. And I've seen so much inspiration from actually paying attention to my surroundings for once, getting off the computer, getting out of the house, taking a walk around the block and just looking at things. No earphones, nothing, just take a walk. Hear the sounds outside, observe the things that are going on around you. And then when you come back in, you kind of have a different perspective of the things around you. So that helps me. And other than that, like talk to other people. There's a lot of us going through the same things, and you don't feel alone when you kind of know we're all kind of collectively going through things together.
Yeah. Nice. I always get the last question really quickly in just 20 seconds. What advice would you give your younger self, or do you wish you had received?
I would have told my younger self, it's okay to fail, and don't be afraid of that.
Nice.
It's okay. Don't be afraid to fail. Yeah.
Lovely. Brandon, I wish we had more time. The questions are really flowing from our community now, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of reach outs. But everyone, please check out Brandon's portfolio. It is amazing and really, truly inspirational career. Thank you so much for your questions and for joining us today. We've been talking with Brandon Viney, Group Creative Director at Google, about staying inspired, staying creative, and also mentoring others. If you'd like to grow your creative confidence, I invite you to check out our course, Cultivating Creative Collaboration. You'll gain skills and techniques to foster creative collaboration and unleash the potential of teams. So you can learn more at IDEOU.com/collaboration. Thank you, and I will see you again soon.
Thank you all. And thank you, Sue, so much.
Bye.